Okay, so good day everyone. Our topic for today is about an enterprise architecture's implementation. Okay, so enterprise architecture was created to simplify information system inside the enterprise and to align information technology and business. Enterprises with EA have an integrated business and IT environment, and EA offers 3 stages as is architecture, not to be architecture, and the transition plan to achieve these objectives. So by using a set of definitions that reflect the current conditions of the enterprise mission, business procedures, and technological infrastructure, as is architecture will define EA's current positions in business and IT. So the enterprise vision is the stage's primary functions according to enterprise vision. And the long-term strategies and ambitions of the firm produces this form of architecture. So finding suitable IS is this stage's primary responsibility. And the transitions from as is now to that to be desired is accomplished through the use of transition plan in enterprise architecture. So utilizing the right implementation strategy is the stage's primary responsibility, and the firm as institution or divisions inside the company can all be considered enterprise under this definition. So functions, data, network, hardware, software components, company locations, human roles, performance indicators, just a few examples of the aspect that can be specified an enterprise architecture. So a solid architectural strategy offers stability and flexibility, which enable the organizations to develop and change. So to give us more details about the topic, let us all welcome our presenter. Go ahead, ma'am.
Good morning, classmates. Good morning, Sir Marmelo. I'm Jinky Falyar Medahili, and I'm about to discuss the value and risk of creating an enterprise architecture. So to give you an overview of this chapter, we will discuss the value and risk associated with creating an enterprise-wide architecture. The main concept of this chapter are the holistic architecture, represent a different way of looking at resources across the enterprise, and that the significant cost of creating a holistic architecture must be justified in terms of the value it will bring to users of EA products or enterprise architecture products in their planning and decision-making activities. So for the objectives of this chapter, we will understand the potential values of a holistic architecture, understand the risks associated with implementing enterprise architecture. We will learn an approach for measuring the costs and benefits of EA program. And lastly, we will understand how holistic architecture help integrate strategy, business, and technology. So for the introduction, the values of EA program in an enterprise. A holistic architecture has the unique capability to bring together views of strategy, business, and technology that allows an enterprise to see itself in current and future operating state. It also supports the modeling of different future operating scenarios which may help the enterprise survive as it responds to changes in the internal and external operating environment, some of which can be unexpected. A EA program established an integrated set of IT resource planning, decision-making, and implementation process that can better identify and resolve performance gap across the enterprise. On the value side, EA is unique in its ability to promote enterprise-wide. Thinking about resource utilization, holistic architecture replace the system-level approaches to IT resource development that have characterized the last several decades and has left many enterprise with stovepipe and or duplicative IT resource. Holistic architecture promotes the development of more efficient enterprise-wide common operating environment for business and technology, in which more capable and flexible business, service, and system can hosted. This in turn makes an enterprise more agile and able to respond to internal and external drives of change, which promote greater level of competitiveness. The benefits should outweigh the cost of doing holistic architecture, or the program should not be established. In the case study example, if an architecture program helps DMC's executive find a combined solution to two sets of business and technology requirements, then a significant amount of money can be saved. Multiply this by several of this situation each year. So makakasave daw talaga tayo using enterprise architecture. Kasi magkakaroon siya ng ano parang pattern na siya may pattern na siya. Further, holistic architecture helps to identify existing duplication in functional capability, which can generate additional savings. Finally, EA documentation helps to identify current and future performance gap and may not be otherwise realized, which enable the enterprise to be more proactive and cost-effective in addressing solution. So malalaman natin in my next slide kung gaano ka-value yung EA sa isang programmer or sa isang system. So meron tayong home architecture analogy dun sa book. It says that it is important for a traditional architecture to use proven engineering method and meets frequently with the owner to make sure the design meets their taste, needs, and budget. Not doing these things introduce the risk of building failure and dissatisfaction with the layout. So meaning, sa IT or sa kahit saan sa abang architecture or sa civil engineer, it is recommended na lagi tayo makipag-communicate with the owner na nagpapag-design sa atin para ma-meet natin yung gusto nila, yung needs nila, at kung pasok ba sa budget nila yung gagawin natin. Kasi kung hindi, magkakaroon tayo ng failure sa building, sa pagbibuild ng building, sa pagbibuild ng system, everything. Kailangan laging may communication, proper communication sa user or sa buyer or kung sino man na nagpapagawa. So, for the risk, meron lang ako i-show sa inyo na isang video set. Wait lang. Paano ba i-stop share to?
IT projects are complex, expensive, and risky.
Share ko lang, sir, ulit. Kita na po, sir. Classmates.
Yes, ma'am.
May have talent. IT projects are complex, expensive, and risky. All too often, projects deliver only to a specification and straight out neglect the desired business outcome. Why? Because of a lack of communication between business stakeholders and developers. As you can imagine, this is not good. Fortunately, enterprise architects can address these issues. They act as interpreters, translating business needs into solution designs and then finally to real systems. Let's be honest, outsourcing with contractors, consultants, and offshoring are often used to fill the gaps between business and IT. But they're expensive and they can be difficult to manage, spread out all over the world. Don't get me wrong, contracting and consulting can be valuable when used wisely. However, the cost of these engagements will eventually exceed the cost of running an EA organization. At that point, it's time to bring that consulting in-house to a dedicated EA firm. Trust me, managing technology strategy full-time job. Just ask Chief Information and Chief Technology Officers. Business stakeholders don't have the time to learn systems development, and it's not really part of their job description. Software developers will, of course, focus on writing software with specifications. Enterprise architects focus on the space between the needs of the business and the needs of the IT departments who support enterprise systems. As you might imagine, EAs have a ton of work. Companies that do not have enterprise architects or EA departments may have talented engineering leads doing some EA tasks. In most cases, unfortunately, is simply not done. EA guidance is tailored and targeted to various stakeholders, presenting the perspective most relevant to them. For example, asset management teams and accounting teams need different things from their systems. Each team's perspective is valid, and all varying concerns must be incorporated in solution design. EA departments have the skills and time to wrangle and reconcile all these different, sometimes competing concerns. Business leaders look to enterprise architecture teams to help them make some of the most important decisions they can make. Do we need a system to support this new business process? Do we build new systems or timelines? Existing platforms or technology to support it? What is the risk of failure in the system currently supported? Enterprise architects work closely with all levels of business to help make the best decisions possible. That, my friends, is how business is presented.
So, ayun. So, based dun sa video, sinasabi lang na yung EA talaga is very important. So, I hope may nakuha kayo dun sa video na yon. So, to continue, I will share again the presentation. Page 5. Yeah. So, on my next slide, I will discuss also the risk and EA program in an enterprise. So, it was also discussed in the video, so I will just repeat. So, creating a holistic architecture for an enterprise can be time-consuming. So, kung walang EA, napakalaking makukonsume nyo na time. Costly. Kasi kung paulit-ulit kayo, magiging costly, syempre. Disruptive to business service, developing detailed documentation that covers strategy, business, and technology within each area of the enterprise can be time-consuming and costly. So, for example, hiring or training an architect and supporting analyst is one element of the cost. Another cost element is the time it takes line of business managers and support staff away from their normal work. And the cost of documentation tools and online repository must be factored in as well. Further, there is the risk that the architecture will be used by stakeholder if they do not buy in to the concept of holistic architecture for perceived value. So for the discussions, we will discuss the overall value, improve planning, better decision making. So we will tackle that one. So communication, managing risk, mitigating risk, which is also discussed on the video, quantifying EA program value, quantifying architecture program costs, linking strategy business and technology planning, linking holistic architecture and organizational strategy, linking holistic architecture and business planning, and linking holistic architecture and technology planning. So for the overall value, the value of holistic architecture is that it enhances resource planning, capability, and supports better decision. So malinaw naman, it will enhance the planning, capability, and support better decision making. This is accomplished through communication improvement in respect to current and future resource. Ideas are conveyed more rapidly while difference in interpretation and misunderstanding are reduced. The overall value of holistic architecture will vary with the size and complexity of the enterprise. The type and number of IT-related performance gap, duplication within current IT resource, and stakeholder acceptance for those larger, less centralized enterprise that are regional or global in nature EA can be an effective governance process for IT resource. For smaller, more centralized enterprise, EA can help to ensure that the organization remains able to align business requirements with technology solution and enhance inventory security and configuration management activity. So how it will improve the planning? Holistic architecture enhance both top-down and bottom-up approaches to planning. Top-down planning begins with consideration for strategy and business, which are enhanced by the holistic perspective of the enterprise that EA provides. Bottom-up planning is also enhanced as EA coordinates what would otherwise be desperate and separate program level planning activities. EA also enhanced strategy planning as it helps to bring together multiple perspective of business and technology at various level of enterprise. And finally, EA supports program and project management by providing a baseline of reference documentation for business alignment, standards, and configuration management. For the better decision-making, EA improved decision-making by providing comprehensive views of current capability and resources, as well as it set up plausible future operating scenarios that reveals needed changes in process and resource. So as as we will discuss on chapter 8 for additional details on future scenarios, those future scenarios will be discussed on chapter 8 also. By having an online repository of information that is updated at regular interval, decision makers have real-time access to high quality information at various level of detail in the EA program linked to other areas of resource governance. So example is the capital planning, project management, and security. Decision makers can obtain coordinated information on operation, support, and development activities. So in chapter 10 and 11, they will provide the additional details on the relationship between architecture, capital planning, project management, and security. So for the communication, which is important on EA, holistic architecture improves communication throughout the enterprise by providing a regularly update baseline of integrated information on strategy. So alam niyo na naman yung baseline, no, kung ano ibig sabihin ng baseline. So ito yung ginagamit para makapag-communicate dun sa ating mga users. Kung tayo ay IT, kung tayo naman ay mga civil engineer dun sa mga buyer natin. Also, EA programs and implementation methodology brings standardized approach and terminologies for the development and management of enterprise resource. This standard architecture language and methodology is especially helpful in large, complex enterprise that are geographically dispersed and which may have multiple social and work cultures that promotes different way of doing things. Holistic architecture should not stay for the creativity that culture diversity can bring, but should augment and enhance that creativity by improving the alignment of business and technology to the strategic goals and initiative of the enterprise. There's an old saying is that a picture is a worth 1,000 words. Architecture drawing and data visualized are some of the most important artifacts and architecture projects produced. So, kung may planning ka, kung may plano ka, so kumbaga sa IT, di ba? Kapag pinaplano mo, dino-drawing mo kung ano yung magiging design ng system. So, mas maganda may ganun. Kahit sa civil, sa pagbibuild ng building, may mga plano rin yun. Mas maraming mabivisualize kasi kapag naka-drawing. Having an online repository of architecture model and information is like having a vault of model, analysis, and reports that can be useful in a variety of activity throughout the enterprise. So it is tremendously valuable if the member of an enterprise can electronically call up the same set of architecture reference. Material at financial planning, meeting, research, and development seminars, sales and marketing review, and daily operation operation and support activities with an updated repository of architecture materials available. Meeting can convey greater amount of information in shorter period of time, achieving higher level of understanding based on a common set of architecture terms, model, and information. So it says that yung meeting daw, mas marami kang makukuha na information para magawa mo yung iyong project. So important talaga yung communication. So for the managing risk is related to uncertainty, and in applied form is the potential source for the failure or underperformance of the program or project. The management of risk involves lowering or eliminating the uncertainty that desired outcome will not be realized. There are several types of risks that related to the implementation and maintenance of the holistic architecture. So, kailangan prior creation ng project, alam mo na yung visualize mo yung mga possible risks para hindi magka-problem yung project mo. So one of these are the financial, lack of acceptance. Lack of acceptance, bakit? Kasi kung hindi nyo nakuha ng tama yung gusto o na-meet yung gusto nung user, hindi nila tatanggapin yung system mo. So magkakaroon ka ng problem. So loss of key personnel, schedule delays. So kung paulit-ulit, kumbaga papareview nyo, ulitin na naman, nagkakaroon ng schedule delays. Documentation tools. So yan, kailangan may mga tools ka for documenting. So it is advisable na lahat na napag-usapan nyo is ma-document nyo kasi yun yung magiging proof mo na yun yung ni-request niya. Kasi masyadong mahirap talaga magpa-approve lalo na kung hindi ma-meet yung gusto ng user. So next is the mitigating risk. Mitigating risk. Risk mitigation is a fancy terms for avoiding or dealing with uncertainties that can have negative impact on the organization, minor or major. EA promotes planning capabilities and response action that reduce the likelihood that source of risk will emerge and negatively impact the organization. Actions that mitigate risk, lower uncertainty include strengthening executive support for the EA program, solidifying budgets, not being the first adopter of EA tools and documentation technology. So ano ibig sabihin ng adapter, not first adopter of EA tools? So meron kasi tayong kumbaga sa IT, kung may mga nauna na kasi parang may mga nauna na gumawa ng system. Parang mayroon na silang pattern eh. So parang yung ginawa na isang class na yon pwede nang magamit din sa susunod na kung kailangan nyo sa susunod na project. So meron siyang pwedeng magamit na effective na before. Ensuring that there are trained backup on the EA team and using the TDL EA implementation methodology to guide the overall program. Additionally, basic program management skills address potential problems of the key personnel, turnover costs, and schedule overruns. performance issues, and stakeholder acceptance. Overcoming issue related to technology compatibility among EA product is usually achieved by using commercial tools that are based on open standard, are matured, and have significant market share. Risk identification and mitigation is not one-time activity. It is an ongoing management review item that is core to an EA program. So next is the quantifying EA program value. How to translate value to the bottom line? It is one of the questions executive and line of business manager. How about EA program? Build a business case that includes an alternative analysis, cost benefits analysis, and return on the investment calculation is the primary measure for evaluating the contribution to profitability and or mission success. Many aspects of EA value can be quantified, including the following areas. So, shortening planning cycles, more effective planning meetings, shorter decision-making cycles, improve reference information, reduce duplicative resources, reduce rework, it improve it improve resource integration and performance. You will have fewer people in the progress. It will improve the communication and it will reduce the cycle time. So shortening planning cycle, EA can help shorten planning cycles by providing a robust repository of online information regarding current and future processes and resources. While EA does not replace strategic planning or business process improvement activities, it does enhance them through contribution of useful information that would otherwise be gathered separately. For the more effective planning meeting, EA information allows for the presentation of a common baseline of planning and reference information. It reduces ambiguity and increased level of common understanding. It will shorten decision-making cycle, the time it takes to gather and crosswalk strategy, business, and technology information is greatly reduced by having a repository of EA information that was developed through the use of a logical framework and archiving method. Decision-making process can be streamlined to reflect the ability of this new resource of integrated baseline information. So it will improve reference information by using an EA documentation, framework, and implementation methodology. Information on process and resources is gathered in a standardized method using the same tools and application. Additionally, the method for storing the information is coordinated through the use of online EA repository, which requires the use of a standardized data and documentation format. This in turn creates the ability to perform queries for information across other disparate activities and resource. It will also support a more robust data mining and business analysis and capability. So sa isang IT organization, meron tayong mga repository doon ng program. So ito yung sinasabi niya na kung meron ka ng mga nagawang program before, you can post there sa repository so that other programmer can use it. So it will lessen yung time eh. So it will improve then yung references kung nagamit yung reference na yon, then may bagong technology, you can improve, then post it again on the repository. Reduction of the duplicative resource. One of the greatest contribution an EA makes to an enterprise is aiding the visualization of the value that current resource provides where those value are overlapped and where performance gap exists. For example, duplicative data represents low-hanging fruits ready for implementation through the implementation of the future architecture. Subsequent improvement might the focus on the introduction of new technologies and improvement in efficiency. It will reduce the rework by approaching the planning and executive of new resource in the holistic manner. Potential rework that might have been created through individual program level initiatives can be avoided. Also, rework is reduced through the use of step-by-step EA methodology and framework that call for the standard approach to documentation based on the matured modeling and analysis technique. So, sinasabi lang dito, since meron na tayong mga patterns or may mga tawag doon, mga frameworks, old frameworks na tayo, marireduce natin yung reworks doon. So, hindi na natin kailangan i-recreate. So, it improve resource integration and performance. EA promotes integration through the planning and utilization of resource on an enterprise-wide basis. EA also helps to compare current and future requirements for business and technology in order to identify performance gap and solution. This result is contrasted with stovepipe program level input to provide incremental improvement within individual labs. So, fewer people in a process. AA support business process re-engineering and business process improvement activity by encouraging planning in the context of both enterprise-wide cross-cutting requirements by and lab requirements. Quantifying this includes the elimination of parts of process that are repetitive, also streaming the process that use resource more efficiently can equate to position, requirement reduction, and payroll savings. So, kung meron na tayong EA, marireduce daw natin yung tao na gagawa. Kasi meron na tayong framework. Improve communication. EA helps to promote a common language and central approach that reduce misunderstanding of resource requirement and potential solution. This can reduce rework. Whole process may require repetition due to the misunderstanding of different interpretation of requirements and solution. Then last is the reduction in cycle time. EA can help an enterprise to reduce the time it takes to plan, develop, implement, and retired resource within its business and technology operating environment. By using an EA methodology and framework, so may framework ha, each resource is evaluated from the same holistic strategy, business, and technology viewpoint and is documented using the same set of EA tools and techniques. So, kung meron ka ng framework, it will reduce your cycle time kasi hindi mo na nga siya gagawin. Next is quantifying architecture program cost. The cost of EA should be approached from the program life cycle view that centers on pace for implementation, maintenance, and refreshment. One way to estimate the architecture program cost is to look at each area and implementation methodology and identify the direct and indirect costs to accomplish each of the steps in general. This would include the following. So program administration and other tie-ins, salary benefits of chief architecture in terms of staff, meeting, so kailangan nyo daw i-check yan lahat. Meeting facilities and materials for stakeholder planning session, platform and web developers to establish the EA repository, interviews and materials to document current views, future scenarios planning session with stakeholder, interview and material to document future views, development and documentation on the transition roadmap, architecture modeling, software and hardware purchase and licenses, regular update for 2 key documentation. So lahat yan kailangan gawin para ma-quantify yung architecture program cost. Next is linking strategy, business, and technology planning. For EA support, an enterprise holistically, it must link or align the strategy, business, and technology planning activities. Holistic EA is most effective when it is simultaneously support top-down executive planning and decision-making across the enterprise and bottom-up management planning and decision-making within the loop. In this way, EA helps to ensure that the strategy drives business and technology planning. From a business perspective, EA provides the context and purpose of the business activity by ensuring technology is implemented only after business requirements are identified. From a technology perspective, EA provides the strategy and business context for resource planning. This can be critical when working with multiple organizations to create common resource such as integrated supply chains or in a case of merger and acquisition. So sa isang project kasi minsan may iba't ibang organization na kailangan mong kunan ng information or na i-communicate yung mga kailangang ilagay dun sa isang system. So yon, kailangan mo ng strategy to link those things. Next is linking holistic architecture and organizational strategy. The framework and methodology organize planning and documentations in a way that allows the strategy to influence business and technology, planning, and decision making. This is important especially in the documentation of future EA views by first identifying what changes are anticipated in a strategic goal and initiative. Subsequent documentation of a business activity and technology resources can be completed in such a way as to promote alignment, efficiency, and effectiveness. Documenting strategy involves the identification of goals, initiative, and outcome measures. The following are the related terms and the concepts. These are the strategic goals, strategic initiative, and strategic measures. So, strategic goals, these are the primary objective of the enterprise. Strategic goals are typically require several years to accomplish. Changes in a strategic goals are made in response in internal and external business and technology drives and or changes in law and regulation. Strategic initiative. These are the business and technology activities, program, and project that enable accomplishment of strategic goals such that they can affect the fundamental direction of the enterprise. The last is the strategic measure. These are the outcome measures that identify when a strategic initiative has successful meet a strategic goal. Outcome goal, it defines when and if the enterprise is accomplished its mission. So meron kang goal, then may initiative ka, then after that na magawa mo na lahat, meron kang measures. May measure mo kung successful yung na-accomplish mong project. Linking holistic architecture and business planning. As it is reflected in the design of the EA framework, strategy creates business requirements and technology supports solution for the meeting. Those requirements EA documents. There are three primary issues of the business level. These are the support strategic goals, documentation of business activities, and identifying supporting technologies. Supporting strategic goals touch points between strategic initiatives and business activities need to be clearly documented. Not all business activities are strategic. And it is important to distinguish um to distinguish in the EA documentation between those directly linked to the strategic initiative and those that provide general support functions for the enterprise. The documentation of business activities, documenting the creation and delivery of business products and services is important in supporting business. Business process reengineering project and in documenting business activities to show inputs, outputs, and outcome, and other elements of influence regarding each process. It's also important to identify how business processes are linked to one another. Last is the identifying supporting technologies. Analyzing business requirements and activities can reveal critical supporting technologies. Example of these include marketing activities that require strength analysis, analysis data, or a manufacturing process that requires various types of resource, including raw materials, facilities, labor, computer, data, and robotics. EA helps to identify and document workflows and supporting technologies. Linking holistic architecture and technology planning. Page 2. Technology is a type of resource that enables information and other resource flow to support the creation and delivery of business product and services, which in turns enable the achievement of strategic goals. It is also important that technology not drive business and strategy planning, especially in resource constraints enterprise where the expense of duplicative non-strategic technologies cannot be afforded. Bottom-up planning. Example, where technology is the catalyst for the change. It is viable. It is a viable use of EA. However, it is not a normal process for resource implementation. It is more important that the enterprise to understand its primary primary direction and priorities, plan necessary business activities, and then identify the supporting resource, including the various type of information and technology. Next is the developing a holistic enterprise architecture. In section 2, it will defines and describe how to accomplish the implement a holistic architecture. So meron akong isang slide doon na nagsho-show ng section 2. It covers what an architecture framework is. It presents a step-by-step methodology for implementation, discuss how to document current and future views of architecture, and describe how to articulate the path forward in architecture transition roadmap, which also serves as a transition and sequencing plan from current to future capabilities. Foundational elements of an EA program are the documentation frameworks and implementation methodology. The documentation framework defines what the EA program will document, and implementation methodology defines how the documentation will be gathered and used. By documenting current and future views along with an architecture transition roadmap, or the architecture improve planning agility, helps to prioritize resource utilization, and helps to lower the risk of the project failure. So as I said, there's a step-by-step on the section. This is the section 2, organize, how it will organize the section 2. So there's a case study, it is a scene or the importance of the methodology. The chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 6, case study again, then chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 9. So for the case study, the importance of the methodology, the case study continues the scenarios at Danforth Manufacturing Company that was presented in the section 1. Now the CAO has decided to produce with an EA program. This part of the case study will focus on how the EA program and the implementation methodology will be executed. The CIO has hired a chief architect who described the needs for the purchase of the holistic methodology. So for the chapter 4, the implementation methodology chapter 4 describes the procedure to for establishing the EA program and developing, maintaining a holistic architecture. The necessity of using a complete architecture approach and holistic framework are discussed, as is the need for documentation at an appropriate level of details to reduce cost and the risk of producing architecture that is not useful. So on chapter 5, the documentation framework describes the purpose of the holistic documentation framework and how it established the scope of the architecture. The EA6 framework is represented in the details as becomes the basis of the further discussion about how a holistic framework links strategy, business, and technology areas together to help improve resource planning and decision-making throughout the organization. So on chapter 6 naman, it will the component and our artifacts architecture component are process and resources that provide capabilities at each level of framework. So example is the include a strategic goal and measure business service information, objects, software application, and network hardware. So artifacts are model that describe architecture component. So on the next case study, which is the scene 4, developing current future views illustrate how current and future architecture view will be developed. Chapter 7 is developing current architecture views, cover the development of the artifacts that reflects current views of component in the content of the EA6 framework and the related implementation methodology. So on chapter 8 naman, we will developing future architecture views cover the development of future views of component in the context of the framework. The chapter also provides description of the method for developing future views that called scenarios planning. The last chapter is the developing an architecture transition roadmap. It discussed the development of architecture transition roadmap, which is the document that describes how an enterprise will manage the transition of each current process and resource to those which will be needed in the future. Yun lang yung last topic ko. Then the references I use is the Introduction to Holistic Enterprise Architecture, 4th edition by Scott Bernard. Then I use yung video na ginamit ko kanina. Ito, pwede nyo rin siyang dyan sa link na yan. Yun lang po, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Madam, for your well comprehensive discussions of the topic. Again, there are many good reasons for investing in an enterprise architecture program. And one possibility by initiating the EA program is to get an overview of strategy, organization, and technology, not to forget an insight into business. And the focus in general, the enterprise-wide or system-wide approach. No, however, there are some risks, no, by using or implementing an EA program in enterprise. Number one, the implementation of an EA might become disruptive to the business, which means that the costly and time-consuming. So when the members of the organizations, no, or the managers, the workers are taken out of production to learn and assist in delivering the enterprise architecture, it is quite clear that the benefits of EA has to be significant higher than cost. Otherwise, shouldn't the EA program not be launched? No. So the value of enterprise architecture is to enhance the resource planning capabilities and support better decisions making. No? This accomplished through communications improvement in respect to current and future resources. So ideas are conveyed more rapidly while differences in interpretations and misunderstanding are reduced. No? So enterprise architecture can be of a value for both the global decentralized organization and the small and medium-sized enterprises. As our presenter mentioned, no? For the large organization or enterprise, the EA can give an effective EA governance process for IT-related issues. For the small, medium enterprise, no, enterprise architecture can give the organizations the benefit of a tool that can add agility and business requirements and technology solutions, and by the enhanced security, inventory, and configuration management activities. So when it comes to planning in enterprise architecture, it enhances or enables both top-down and bottom-up planning approaches. So I think everybody are familiar when it comes to the top-down planning approach. No, it will focus on considerations for strategy and business that are made into a holistic model, no, of the organization. On the other hand, focus on the bottom-up planning is based on that the individual projects are through into a program that forms the overall planning. So communications are improved by the EA repository that gives each member in the organization an opportunity to create a conceptualized model can be created. Okay, so our presenter mentioned earlier the discussions of the financial, lack of acceptance, loss of key personnel, schedule delays, and documentation. So I think that's it for this topic.